with prayers and wishes.
Could slide? Slide. Okay.
Let us all get into a comfortable position for the prayer. Dear God, thank you for giving us this beautiful day. We are gathered here today to celebrate and honor the exemplary achievements of this year's Nobel laureates for their significant and remarkable contribution to society, their respective fields, and for being beacons of inspiration to all young and curious minds. As we begin this event, we ask for your wisdom and grace to guide each one of us all along the way and to make this endeavor of ours a
Thank you, Andrea, for a great start. Now that we have set a great tone, it's my pleasure to welcome Professor Anand Kondapi, Dean, School of Life Sciences, to share a few words of support and begin today's event. Sir, please.
Good afternoon to all students and colleagues from different other schools. It is a very good and important and very good event, collective event of School of Economics and the School of Life Sciences and the Junior Science Club and the Senior Science Club and the other community, student community. And this is a kind of collective activity certainly should be able to bring lot of in-depth understanding to science students in different areas where now no more there is a different discipline. Disciplines are now together in terms of implementation of science and the other disciplines of learning. So really helpful to have this kind of cross-disciplinary program, and I encourage students to go through this kind of interaction among you and bring various new ideas and new new strategies for implementation, not only in the area where you are working, also implementing various SDG activities on the campus. If you've been able to do this, actually the activity, and also we used to conduct science every year in February 28th. We used to conduct Science Day celebrations. I don't know its country code. And this was initially done by School of Life Sciences, later taken over by Junior Science Club. Hope it is continued. And I request you also give opportunity to the other students like children to showcase some of the exhibits of some of the areas where you work. Open day. So similar activity so that society directly able to see what your ideas and the science you can able to demonstrate various experiments, both various principles to the young minds and bring a interest in science. So most of the students are thinking about technologies, whether you can bring them into science board. So this kind of initiative certainly help in enriching science and also informing the community importance of science. So this also we should take note and wish you all the best for this 2 days event whatever you plan.
Thank you so much, sir. Your continued support for the club is always inspiring.
Moving ahead, I would like to invite Dr. Manjri Kiran, Faculty Coordinator of JSC, for a few words. Ma'am, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just now, what we listened from Professor Anand Kunapi, Dean, School of Life Sciences. We are very excited for this event. So, just like Junior Science Club, we have Senior Science Club in School of Life Sciences, and I'm very glad to note that we have e-converse now from School of Economics. So, we'll be looking forward for many such events, and would like to learn something from School of Economics regarding new discoveries and new findings. So I would like to bring one important point here. Although we do these events every year, but it is done always in like in 2 days. Like organization is done in 2 days time, so it's not easy for these students to pass the information to every student, and they take out time after the class to organize the event. So it really requires a lot of effort from their side. They run from here and there to get approvals from every higher authorities for access to different um, like this seminar hall, for example. I'm thankful to Professor Anand Kunapi for giving us approval whenever we have asked for. So similarly, other students also they have to leave their practical classes or in between have to leave classes to organize the event. So we always look forward for support from every faculty to organize this kind of event in different ways. So wishing all of you all the best for Nobelium event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your support has always been inspiring for us. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Srijit Mishra, representing School of Economics for the Club of Econverse, to share a few words on this.
Good afternoon, all. I think thank you. I'm also quite new to this whole thinking here. The reason for I joined 2.5 months ago, and my reason is that perhaps the university would give an opportunity to interact beyond economics. And I think this is Nobelium bringing together different science and disciplines. The awards that came about is the right thing, and I would expect that more. I would expect more such events do happen, perhaps beyond classroom hours, and maybe having got that opportunity, I thought I'll share one thing. And I have been thinking of an overarching research and teaching called Praniti, like policies for reimagining agriculture through nature integrated technology and innovation. So one first thing that has been in my mind is to have internships in rural India, where you can have plant sciences, animal sciences, economics, and other social sciences. Everybody, students, those are interested can indirectly get in touch with me. I'm reaching out to civil society and various other groups. So if something comes out, maybe next summer we will have a more exciting interdisciplinary internships happening across the country. So wish you all the very best. I look forward to not listening only to Professor Raman Murthy in economics, but I would like to listen to other talks also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, as a token of love and gratitude, we would like to give a small token of love from our side. Sir, ma'am, come on to the stage, please. Sir. I again welcome you all to Nobelium 2024. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
No more sound. I'm not able to hear, guys. Guys, lunch you people had na?
Yes.
Are you people are bored with economics? I guess it's a good talk for sure. Okay, let's begin. Now, as we move forward, I would like to call upon Lisa, who will be introducing our first speaker for the day.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Lisa Lacroix, on behalf of Econverse, would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. Entropy organizes Nobelium 24 every year, and today we have collaborated with Econverse, the Economics Club of University of Hyderabad. Econverse is a student-led initiative within the School of Economics at University of Hyderabad, founded in 2023 by economic students. The Econverse aims to cultivate a deeper understanding of economics. This initiative facilitates monthly publications of students' perspectives on contemporary economic trends. It also showcases scholarly contributions from students on contemporary issues, research outcomes, and innovative ideas in economics and social sciences. It actually offers them a platform to share their insights and curiosities about ever evolving economics landscapes. And it works on applications of economics worldwide. Now, turning to today's focus is the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. This year's Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences focuses on the role of institution in shaping economic prosperity. The laureates demonstrated an inclusive institution which protect individual investment and promote economic rights, foster long-term growth and prosperity. In contrast, extractive institutions where the state control sees resources hinder growth. The groundbreaking work provided immense evidence on the link between institution economic outcomes, emphasizing the importance of fostering this political economic environment for sustainable growth. To know about this more, we are privileged to have with us today Professor R.V. Ramanna Murthy, former Dean School of Economics at University of Hyderabad, to lead us into a critical assessment of this year's Nobel winning research. Professor Ramanna Murthy is a distinguished scholar in economics. His expertise spans the political economy of development, capitalism, agrarian change, and development issues. He has established about 44 articles in national and international journals, edited a book published by Routledge, and has led five significant projects. Sir has mentored numerous scholars, guiding 12 PhD students and 18 MPhil dissertations. In recognition of his remarkable contributions, he was awarded the Distinguished Contribution to Political Economy by the World Association of Political Economy in Moscow in 2017. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor R.V. Ramanna Murthy to the stage. So, please.
Thank you, Lisa. I suspect most of the audience are economic students. Am I right? Oh, I, if there are science students, I'm pleasantly surprised. Um, anyway, it gives a great pleasure for me to talk on this event, and also it gave me an opportunity actually to read the book of the Nobel winners in economics this time. I mean, Nobel Prize comes every year, so it's difficult to follow every Nobel Prize winner's works. And but the work of Simeglo and others fall in the area of institutions and political economy. So I'm partially familiar with the work, and his book actually has uh, dispelled many misapprehensions which I had about them. So, without wasting much time, I thought I'll keep the lecture simple for the sake of students. And it is not, I don't claim this lecture as an authoritative representation of their work. It is a commentary of partial reading, which is only possible. And little history about Nobel Prize in Economics. As we all know that it is originally given only in the areas of physics, chemistry, peace and literature, and medicine. The Nobel in Economics was constituted in 1969 with the Swedish Central Bank funding the prize money to commemorate actually the 300th anniversary of the Central Bank of Sweden. So it is officially still known as Sveriges Riksbank Prize for Economic Science in memory of Alfred Marshall. The prize was constituted to, as I told you, to commemorate the anniversary of the bank. Coming to how many people were given Nobel Prize in economics, about 130 economists have been given this prize so far, and 71 of them have gone to American economists. About 13 went to English, and the rest went to some 18 countries, economists from 18 countries. So it is highly dominated by the Anglo-Saxon, especially English and American world. And two Indian origin economists are also got the Nobel Prize, but they were also actually positioned in America. So other day, Vice Chancellor has actually asked a guest of a guest which we received, Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar, that why don't people in India receive Nobel Prize? So C.P. Chandrasekhar said, yes, sir, there are two Indians who received, but they had to work in Harvard or MIT. And I think Vice Chancellor agreed that similar is the situation about sciences too. That most probably because of the infrastructural reasons and for several reasons, only those who are located in the first world had the privilege of actually doing an excellent work as well as receiving the Nobel Prize. So majority of the economists were also located either in the US or in the Europe. Most of the Nobel Prize have gone to only few universities like MIT, Harvard, Chicago, Stanford, LSE, and Cambridge. What are the areas in economics which this area which Nobel Prize has been given so far is macroeconomics, public finance, international trade, general equilibrium, econometrics, development economics, game theory, geometrics, new institutional economics, financial economics, RCT methods, and commons. And there is some kind of transition. There is always an opinion, strong opinion in the academia that Nobel Prize is given for mainstream economists. There are several schools of thought in economics. So only mainstream economists actually received Nobel Prize. But there are schools of thought which are diametrically opposite to mainstream, but along with them, there are also not so much, but they differed with the mainstream. They also began to receive Nobel Prize in the last 20 years. So the Nobel is a recognition for the outstanding work in the areas of economics that impacts and the understanding and the policy. So despite the scientific status given to the discipline, the economics policies are actually heterogeneous, ideological, and changing. Therefore, it is alleged that some element of bias also exists in the selection. There are ideological swings in the nature of economic policies with regard to management of capitalism, in relation to the extent of state intervention in the markets. So, accordingly, Nobel Prize also reflected this changing thinking. They are often given to economists who try to argue that the intervention of state, however, is against the intervention of the state into the markets. However, it's given to others also, conceding to the power of the alternative views in the few decades. The prize is never given to any Marxist economist so far. This year, the Nobel Prize is given to Darren Acemoglu. Probably I'm mispronouncing. Maybe it must be Doran Acemoglu, who is a Turkish economist, and Simon Johnson both of these are from MIT, and James Robinson of Chicago, in the areas of inclusive and extractive institutions that make rich and poor nations. Politically, these arguments are liberal. Of these economists are liberal and social democratic, which is actually surprising because earlier many economists received Nobel Prize have extremely right-wing or libertarian views. So these are the these are the three photographs of the three Nobel laureates of this year. So just to begin with, world is very unequal, and there are rich countries, and there are middle-income countries, there are lower middle-income countries, and there are less developed countries. So I'm just showing you some 18 countries, top 18 countries, who have got more than $39,850 per capita income. Per capita income is one of the important indicators of a country's level of prosperity. And among them, most of us, you know who these countries are. They are basically located in the West. Most of them are only Western countries, except the oil-rich countries which have come of recently, like Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, etc. Question is, why did the rich nations are located only in the West? The second question is, why did only former imperialist countries become rich, with very few exceptions in the recent decades, namely Taiwan and South Korea? China is entering, but because of its population, its per capita income is still not showing in a middle income level. But if you see, all those countries which became rich have practiced imperialism and colonialism without exception. Everyone had colonies in the 19th century. And without colonies, actually, they could not industrialize at all from 1800 to 1940. So, and question is also, therefore, will the gap between the rich and poor countries, which is very wide, actually, poor countries are all between less than $2,000, $1,500. The rich countries are somewhere between $40,000 to $89,000. So the gap between the two are actually very difficult to be bridged. There are a lot of studies about convergence and so on, whether convergence is possible. So can the poor countries ever experience growth and prosperity? If so, how? To some extent, Asimoglu and Johnson and Robinson have actually addressed this question. To begin with, I have only referred to their popular works, namely their work Why Nations Fail. They have got two more called The Narrow Corridor and some other book which I did not have access. I did not access. So in the book Why Nations Fail, the book is actually written only by the two, not the trio, but the views actually are of the three. They reject three types of received hypotheses about why some countries are rich and why some countries are poor. Their first of such hypothesis, geography hypothesis. So geography hypothesis says that geographical factors favored some country to grow rich. For example, Britain. Britain has been an island, so it was far from the wars of the continent, and therefore it was not as damaged as Europe, which remained behind Britain in development. Or there are certain Africa, for example, did not have draft cattle, which is very, very important for agriculture. and because Africa is supposed to have had a fly called tsetse fly, which carried some highly dangerous viruses, which cause disease in cattle so there are no horses in Africa. So some people said that historically, when Europe and other places had better cattle, Africa did not have. So that is one reason. That's such examples. But Asimoglu and his colleagues, they reject this hypothesis, saying that doesn't really explain, because there are also places like South America, which had, in the ancient times itself, they've got Aztec and Mayan civilizations, which had a very great empires, and therefore that do not really, with the times when the other civilizations have not developed, those civilizations have developed. So doesn't really account for. It can cause, but it can't completely explain. Similarly, they also reject another hypothesis called cultural hypothesis. This cultural hypothesis is, they cite Max Weber, for example, who suggested that the Protestant ethic of the Reformation movement actually has stimulated and caused the development of capitalism in the Anglo-Saxon world. So he therefore he says that, in what way? Because the religion put a lot of restrictions on accumulation of wealth, which Catholic religion always held it as a sin, and collected money from them, so that their sins are the Rome collected, say, what's called, I forgot the name. So they to absolve the sins, so that the money is used for poor people. So the Reformation said that there's nothing wrong in accumulation, as long as you use it for creating further employment for the rest of the people. It is not for your own consumption. Capitalists should not become greedy and etc. But you should use it for increasing the production and increasing the opportunities for others. And also the restrictions of there were restrictions on interest, because religion always said that taking interest was wrong, etc. Even now Islam preaches that. But Asimoglu and others say that this also doesn't really work, because there are countries which had banking in Pisa, which are Medici. Medicis are very famous bankers who have actually financed the first wave of commercial development in Italy, and being still Catholic, and still they try. So that doesn't explain. Similarly, the Dutch have had banking 100 years before the Reformation movement, and therefore that did not prevent some countries to emerge. So they reject that the religion would ever either will promote or are the reasons for either backwardness or richness. Many people think that Islamic countries are backward because religion hold them back. But Asimoglu says that you can look at examples of Malaysia and Indonesia and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which have become remarkably modern and achieved middle income level of growth, and therefore that doesn't really, there must be some other reasons why they are poor. The third hypothesis they reject is ignorance hypothesis. Ignorance hypothesis, some economists expressed that the rich nations had the knowledge of the better practices in business, know-how, benefits of the free markets, and allocate to efficiency of resources. But there are several countries that have adopted free markets, like Ghana and Peru and Sri Lanka and Chile and Bolivia, and they all fell in severe debt crisis in the recent times, and therefore knowledge of free markets and practice of free markets alone did not really benefit all countries. So they say that this also is not. So therefore they say that they establish with evidence that what are the much more important factors for development and prosperity, that is institutions. Developed nations grew rich because they have developed good institutional rules. What are institutions? Institution is set of rules. In terms of more logical sense. So institution rules that created incentives for growth of prosperity and its distribution, both growth and distribution. Private property rights, according to the Esemoglu and Robinson and Johnson, played a prominent role to begin with, and they had democracies. The Glorious Revolution, I mean, it all began very historically. They explain with a lot of historical things. To cite a few, that the Glorious Revolution in Britain in 1664 ended the absolute power of Henry V and absolute power of the monarchy, and thereby it created a parliamentary democracy, which is actually strictly not parliamentary democracy because people still did not have franchise, but landlords had created House of Lords, and which they represent the people, and they'll convey to the king. So of course, even though they brought the king back after Cromwell left for US, but the king's powers were remarkably reduced, and it is Parliament which basically ruled England. And the English Parliament, according to Esemoglu, facilitated discussions and deliberations about the interests of different groups and emerging groups, of particularly that of the industrial bourgeoisie and industrials, professionals and so on, who eventually created House of Commons. And House of Commons today is their parliament, and House of Lords is Rajya Sabha, which is relegated. Now no longer, but all through the tussle between the power and the powerless was finally resolved through a parliamentary debate, and violence was avoided, and civil wars are avoided, and Britain therefore was continuously on the path of prosperity. American Revolution ended colonial rule in America, and then established their own parliament and the Senate and etc. And that has actually deliberated the negotiation of interests of different people whenever they had problems, and then democracy actually has greatly benefited. The French Revolution paved the way to remove the extractive aristocratic class who are rent seekers, and then created National Assembly where the interests of the common people were discussed and so on. So they say that rich nations, entire Europe, eventually had parliamentary democracy, which played a major role in their prosperity and building of capitalism. They also say that in the 14th century, again from the history, that England, after suffering from Black Death, gave individual property rights to the landlords, which played an important role. Because they think that those who have property rights have incentives to use the property in productive way. There should not be any ambiguity in the property right, nor a threat to take the fruits of the property to be taken away from people. Only then they will perpetually look after the property, and they will produce using those properties. So landlords who subsequently in England in 14th century developed wool production to grab the growing global demand at that time, and that was the foundation for British capitalism. All European countries subsequently followed them and adopted individual property rights. There are countries where property cannot even be taken away, and this used to be the case during monarchies, and monarchy always had supporters. And then if the monarch's brother comes to the throne, then he used to take away the properties of the friends of his brother and so on. So even now, in many autocratic countries, there are people who are close to the ruling clique, and only they are allowed to have property. And if the ruling party or ruler falls, then they either flee the country with the property, etc., or their properties are confiscated. Such uncertainty doesn't really create conditions for people to actually invest. That's what these people. This is the classical liberal argument. Similarly, contract law. Contract law is that if two persons make freely a contract about a certain exchange, then the state will implement that contract. That's the contract law. If two persons voluntarily under no duress they make agreements, then state will implement if one of the parties fails to implement the contract. The state will provide the solution for it. So this is a Roman law. A Roman law is subsequently adopted and carried forward, became a basis for trade, and it encouraged making credible promises to each other and played a great role. So this is regarded as one of the institutional arrangements after property. Contract law is considered to be a very important institutional mechanism. This much has been said about institutions, actually already by Douglas North, his predecessor, who received a Nobel Prize in 1993. This is not what Asimoglu has said. This is what a lot of people have said. All institutional economists, called this a particular school called New Institutional Economics, they have said it. But what Asimoglu and others have added are that there are inclusive institutions which will create inclusive markets. They begin with the received economic logic for growth that needs machines, human labor for production and marketing, which needs to be financed with a profit motive. And they balance all the different, these two different factors, which is that labor and entrepreneurship both are equally important. Most of the mainstream economists focuses on the entrepreneurship and the interests of the entrepreneurs, and it leaves the interests of the workers aside. But the Asimoglu and others say that one has to balance the interests of the both. Education, skills, competence, and knowledge are intimately linked to productivity, hard work, and shared prosperity. Those who made this possible needs the liberty and freedom to create innovative products. No one should threaten them to take it away from them. So people need skills, education, and know-how to participate in the production process. So that has to be imparted to them. If they are not imparted, if the nation doesn't really allocate enough resources for education, for lower level to higher education, because it's a process, then that system cannot be inclusive. If the education becomes an exclusive preserve of a few elite classes, and then majority of the labor class does not have skills, then there is no way you are going to go into the higher ends of supply chains. You will end up with the lower ends of supply chain, which presently countries like India are experiencing. They also say that America is an example where, because of these institutions, have finally created so many billionaires, like Thomas Edison is the first one who created the bulb, and then Gerald Ford, who created the automobiles, and Jeff Bezos, who made Amazon, and Steve Jobs, Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk. All of you I don't have to tell about. Low education, poor governance, extractive political incentives for inclusive markets, bad institutions will create disincentives and create poverty. So there are the opposite of inclusive institutions, they call them extractive institutions, and they destroy incentives. They say that Western nations have created inclusive institutions for themselves. A further point is that, okay, are the inclusive institutions, where are they? I mean, did the West also ruled and colonized other parts of the world? And they all went there to say that this is a white man's burden, and then they have to develop them, etc., etc. So did they extend those good institutions there? They say, they acknowledge that the Europeans have preserved those good institutions for themselves, but did not actually extend those good institutions to the colonies. And but among them, USA, Canada, Australia had their own people settled, white people settled, and they finished off the native population. They practiced slavery, and even though inclusive institutions were created for whites in USA, Australia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Canada, South American countries, denying them the natives and aborigines any rights till middle of the 20th century. However, democratic struggles eventually succeeded in giving rights to the colored people. So there also, if you take Latin America, the Spanish and Portuguese have created the migrant population of these have usurped all the resources there and denied the natives any resources, and they did not develop. They used them as almost semi serfs in their haciendas for hundreds of years. And Americans used black labor to produce cotton for more than 150 years until it was abolished during the Civil War. So there are good institutions within America, but it is only for the preserve of the white minority, but for others did not. But eventually they also had to extend. Why? Because if you have democracy, eventually then you will have to allow people who are neglected and who are resisting. They also will have to call for some kind of dialogue, and you will have to talk to them, and then you have to address. Even in Europe, Asimoglu and others note that the extreme inequality in Western society was resented. The inclusive institutions were not simply created overnight. Until 18th century, till 19th century, the European societies were extremely unequal. But the working class, they fought picture battles in the streets, managed to form social democratic parties. They came into also power and found legal safeguards finally through protective legislations. So like workers' rights and consumer rights, environmental rights, and gender justice, LGBT rights, and all these are through the parliamentary democratic system. So all these democratic struggles put pressure on the elite to concede to their demands, and liberal parliamentary institutions diffused the difficult situations of the confrontation and finally making facilitating dialogue in the root, and then rather than roots of violence. The Asimoglu and Robinson says that the fight for liberty was not actually not very comfortable, and they wrote the second book called The Narrow Corridor: State, Societies and Fate of Liberty, and they enter into the fields of politics to show the knife edge of liberty from the state itself. The interwar period, democratic struggles have led to the welfare state, as we all know. That there was a Soviet Union and the socialist model was threatening, and therefore the capitalist countries had to take a middle path to say that, look, you don't have to go for socialism. It had to tell its workers that we will offer the rights, we will offer you minimum wages, we will offer you unemployment benefits, we will offer you various emoluments against inflation and so on. So all these also have, because they had to finally come to terms and bargain. So the capitalists were made to actually come to terms and then make a compromise so that a better distributional networks are created, and they pay higher taxes so that different interests of the society are also taken care. So capitalism creates prosperity, but capitalism also creates inequality, and therefore institutions are needed to balance this complete monopolization of the fruits, because everybody contributes to the prosperity, but the system enables only to capitalists to accumulate. So therefore, there is an institutional balance has to be created, and they say that democracy therefore becomes extremely important. They give a lot of examples, but for me, I'm only giving you the gist of the argument. They give extensive argument. It's a big 600-page book which gives from ancient world to the modern. They give a lot of examples. So the elites therefore lost their dominance. What happened in the last 70 years was that during 1950 to 1980, the Western democracies had to become very inclusive societies, and that's the period of Cold War. And then at the same time, there is intense competition among them, and then there is a rise in cost of production, and finally the profit rates have come down, and they had to really it created a crisis of kinds, and there is a retaliation from the capitalists who had to suffer certain reduction of their incomes for 30 years. So they have actually financed parties like Republican parties and so on, who have actually implemented what's called neoliberal policies, where the things have become made more flexible, and workers' rights were slightly diluted, and capital could migrate, and thereby the several benefits which working class had were slowly withdrawn. And these actually have worked for the capitalists who have actually have also benefited from the new technological revolution, and but middle class as such has severely lost in the West. They, what we call for working class, they call it middle class. The middle class actually have lost, and severe inequality happened in the past 30 years. And Asimoglu and others, they take this as a very bad sign for a stable society. And this has been said by others also, like Thomas Piketty, who has probably he also should deserve one, but he gave with a lot of data about inequality estimations, because data is a very, very big problem in economics. We can have a lot of ideas, but to prove with data is the most difficult thing. So the Western democracies actually cease to be Athenian democracies. Athenian democracies are the examples of what a democracy is. They are like small city states like this, where a group of us will sit in the hall and we can discuss and so on, where everybody has the right to participate and nobody is denied. But whereas our indirect representational systems have been hijacked, and those who get money from the corporates, they get elected, and in America itself, the two parties, they receive almost 50% of the finances, and both of them today actually there's no difference. And today in last elections last week, American voters had a confusion. What is the whether should they should vote for Biden or vote for Trump? Sorry, vote for Harris or vote for Trump? But there are not much differences. And then they were angry with the Harris that why is she pretending, so they. But it comes in coming to foreign policy and economic policy, both of them had very minute differences. Fundamentally, both of them had the same policies, which led to this great inequality, unemployment, and problems of the middle class in America. And they're really struggling to find answers. So, Asimoglu and others express their concern about the death of democracy, not only in America, but across the world in the last 10 years. The dream of classical liberalism actually has been fading, and liberals are under attack. Liberals argue that this liberalism is very important for sustained economic growth. So, in their book, Narrow Corridor, they make a nuanced argument for a necessity of a reasonable corridor for the state to operate, which is not too much, not too little. Too much state can degenerate into autocratic and fascist state. and too little state will become society very unequal. So this argument is very pragmatic and very well balanced, in my opinion. It is distinctly better than that of the earlier Nobel Prize winners like Douglas North, who offered very mechanical arguments of institutions as leading to development. Asimoglu and others qualify well their institutions as inclusive and extractive. They seem to understand inequality as the fundamental feature of capitalism. So democracy is a solution for an inclusive society. So the extractive institutions, they create poverty. They give plethora of examples of poor countries which lack democratic institutions. Congo, for example, it was actually originally brutally colonized by Belgium. The Belgian king was known to be extremely cruel, and if you know that they all believed in eugenics, and science people here maybe must have thought it's a pseudoscience, that one of the pseudosciences, that it's a science of races. There are no science of races. It's bogus. They thought that white race is the supreme race, and they really believed it. Then the Browns and Arabs and Jews and Indians, they kept in a descending order, and blacks in the last. They created museums of blacks, human museums in Europe, by creating how they live, thatched huts, etc., as a museum. And it's a mark of how they are developed and how these savages in Africa. So what happened after Belgium left? After Belgium left, Asimoglu says that it is captured by the next elite which is created by the Belgians. Belgians had to create the next 2-3 layers of elites to rule the people. So the next elite captured. And then finally, Mobutu was Mobutu, he was the president, and then he was defeated by now another one. Another one is no better. He is serving another elite. So the struggle, therefore, is on. The struggle never stopped. And unfortunately, the path dependence, there's something called path dependence. What a path set by your predecessors will continue to run, and then it's difficult to get out of the path. So that is still plaguing Congo. So you need to. Congo is very rich in resources, as all of you know. That Western countries are. It is rich in cobalt and nickel, and then now lithium and so on. So copper. So it has been extracted like anything. But despite being rich, they don't know how to use the resources. So what they need is the human resources. To create human resources, you need a government who will invest in human resources. And that government should therefore think of its people, not of its tribe or its elite only. So that was missing. So they also cite North Korea as another example, where the elite minority captured the state power after the so-called revolution, after the World War II. And it extracts everything extra value generated by the people, so who lost. Therefore, there's no incentive to produce anything. The country exists in the subsidy provided by the China. Pakistan is also another example, a classic example, where the Punjabi elite captured the country, army, etc. They will not let anybody else to share power with. And they do not, any amount of money, any amount of aid will go into the pockets of the elite, especially the military elite. So therefore, it becomes a failed state. Turkmenistan, another example, is a member of, is still very, almost, it has got a per capita income of $14,000, much more than India, but it's still very conservative, doesn't allow any foreigners, doesn't allow any interaction with the foreigners. They are highly afraid of any influence coming to the country. They think that there will be liberal demands for all kinds of freedoms, which they can't, they may not be able to handle. So these are all kinds of examples which Asimoglu gives that they have to change, and otherwise even those which have resources, still they don't go any prospect to go further, because people who have the capability to take the societies forward don't have the liberty. So the final assessment, Asimoglu, James Robin had done definitely an advancement in the understanding of the growth of global prosperity and inequality. They have added the role of political institutions in making inclusive capitalism, which is refreshing. After a long time, economists were suffering under the dry, historical, and unrealistic understanding from the mainstream economics. They have brilliantly combined the traditionally evolved economic understanding of your macro and micro, etc., which are there: investment, savings, and productivity, technology, they are there. But you need institutions which will allow them to operate. And they broke also the Homo economicus. Homo economicus is an assumption, is a methodological feature of economics where mainstream treats economic decision making as independent. It is not influenced by sociology, social rules, political rules, etc. It is autonomous. So that's actually, which is actually not true. They have actually therefore broken this. Therefore, methodologically, this is an advancement in economics, I would consider. Even the Nobel Society acknowledged their contribution as a role of democracy for development. However, AJ are also accused of selective and inaccurate in describing the so-called corrupt regimes and virtuous political regimes in the West. The political regimes are not very virtuous. They're still, there is a connection between the corrupt regimes in the corrupt and extractive regimes in the third world and the so-called very good inclusive institutions of the West. They are under the influence of, so the criticism is that the West practices neocolonialism in different forms. It gives loans and it gives aid and it keeps it funds the elite parties into power and therefore interferes into the third world countries, destroys their democracies. There's a wonderful book by Timothy Mitchell, an American anthropologist, who argued that wherever there is petroleum, there won't be democracy in that country. Because the petroleum corporations, the oil corporations are so powerful that they will capture the national resources. They'll fund those who will keep the oil prices low, and then who are in the influence of the West. And anybody who is democratic, etc., they'll be killed or they'll be bought off. So with examples he gives, and in the Arab lands, let us in South, they're all normally they're very autocratic countries. Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Iran, etc. But it is not that there was no democratic struggles, but in democratic struggles were actually nipped in the bud by the West. And that is a still uncomfortable truth of how democracies are not allowed to function for the interests of the rich Western countries, which Asimoglu doesn't really refer to. And therefore, to that extent, he falls short of actually the realist explanation. But yet, Nobel Society has come this far to give a Nobel Prize for these economists who are social democrats and who want inequality to be removed and who want inclusive institutions. This itself is actually very, very long way Nobel Society has come. It's a very welcome step for.
Thank you so much, sir, for the enlightening lecture. It was really great. Now, moving forward to question answer session. If anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and ask, sir. Anyone?
I have a question. You would like to ask?
Come on. Yeah.
Not that I'm an expert, nor I'm capable of answering. But so therefore, I'll answer to the extent to which, yes, I'll stand.
Thank you so much for the insightful session. And also thank you so much for agreeing so immediately when we approached you. And thank you so much for making the efforts to make such wonderful PPT. I'm really totally awestruck of you at the moment. Coming to the questions, sir. So two questions. The first question is, so for the Nobel laureates, for the question that why certain countries remain poor, the answer that they're given is that they don't have inclusive institutions, and that's the gist. Um, so in a way, I can they assume certain virtues to the inclusive institutions, but do they consider incidents like in the history where America tried to impose the inclusive institutions in Afghanistan? It failed. The growth certainly did not happen. So when anyone did not consider the particular ethos of the society, like maybe when they implement the property rights, there will be tribes coming in, indigenous rights coming in. So did they actually talk about that? And you certainly mentioned the criticism. I acknowledged it, but then what is your view? I also want to know that. The second question, sir.
On Afghanistan? On Afghanistan or any other?
No, basically, I mean, the fact that they did not acknowledge this, or maybe acknowledge what is. The second question, sir. Uh, the reason they said again why there are extractive institutions is because of one of the reasons colonialism. So and post-independent, whatever the model that we adopted is kind of extractive in their framework, like too much central, liberal rights and all. So and the narrative that we were given is that that at that point juncture, USSR was the most successful model. But do you think maybe like subconsciously or like these colonies, the history of having the British colonialism also influenced Nehru to go for that model?
We had a conference 2 weeks back on the history of economic thought. There was a keynote address which discussed about how implementation of private property rights in India failed to produce prosperity. Of course, it was so abstract that many of you attended probably still have not actually got the argument because he was very abstract. The property rights implementation in the colonies were done recklessly without really understanding the local conditions. Therefore, they had only one motive, that they had to extract more taxes from the land. But they have to wait until the prosperity to generate, and then if the prosperity generates, they can tax. But they started from the day one the tax. They distributed land to A, B, and C and said, okay, fine, thank you, you are the owner, now you have to pay the tax. And then the farmers really had to jostle and choose crops which have got a market value and then produce, face the production conditions, etc. And then eventually, when the production really increased, then the supply exceeded the demand, and the markets crashed, and they all got indebted in several places. This led to the several farmers' unrest in the country. If you have heard of the Champaran, in East Champaran district, the indigo farmers' violence and so on. So, on the whole, the historians have said that even the creation of permanent settlements, where the earlier Munsabdars were given property rights over scores of villages. They were only tax collectors earlier in the Mughal rule, but now they were given property rights. So it created a chain of intermediaries who extracted rent and finally left nothing for the producers. So therefore, it created famines, it created indebtedness, etc. So property rights should be implemented in a way where the real producers get the incentive. They just have no idea who is the real producer. There are layers of middlemen. Everybody said, I am the middleman, I am the farmer. But he is not actually the farmer. Farmer is somebody else. Similarly, in the Raitu Bazaar, farmers are given, in Andhra Pradesh, we have an experiment where farmers are given an identity card. They can come and sell in the market. But it is basically middlemen who sell. So they all came. The middlemen got the identity cards of farmers and sell. One, the farmers don't have the time, etc. So idea is good of Chandrababu Naidu, but he has to. It has to be calibrated in a way where they have the facilities, transport facilities, the time, etc., and come into. So property rights themselves don't directly. There are other institutional mechanisms carefully has to be done, which the colonial masters did not really care about. Where in their own countries they are historically developed, and then but the such here they are and they simply implement it. And therefore in Afghanistan, they after the mess they have created, and finally they have created a devil called Talibans, and who never, I mean, the country has never come to terms with. And who created Taliban? Who created Mujahideen? Americans just wanted to defeat Russians, and therefore went and armed these extremely illiterate people with no culture, etc. And then much more cultured people of the other, they were subjugated. And Karzai, the Pashtuns are known to be extremely mountainous people. They have got no idea. My student is just sitting there from Afghanistan. He narrates me the stories after stories. And now whole country is now in the hands of those Pashtuns who believe that the women should be put in the burqa, and they did not give any. They neither need food nor education. They also don't have to be fed anything. And each man can go and marry 14 times, 12 times. So then you put the people, you put power. I mean, you should not have created a devil. And then after that, it takes, we don't know when the struggles will definitely will happen. And let us hope that Afghanistan also will see the light of democracy, and they will all be on the path of development. They have rich natural resources. But once you interfered, and then if you recklessly, if you do it, then also coming out of also will be very difficult. I mean, there's a very big question about yes, at the time, it's an Indian economy. You will do a course on Indian economy, you will get the answer there. I will be very brief in 1 minute, uh, because the at the time we already had the free markets under British, which did not benefit us. It's a small middle class, a group of middlemen who benefited. It is money lenders who benefited. So therefore, they were at that time the market-led model did not really have currency at that time. So it was Soviet Union which made progress. It was a backward country and became a strong, became industrial power. It actually defeated Soviet Union, sorry, the Nazis, and therefore the prestige of Soviet Union was very high. And then all the countries, there's no country which did not that, talk in terms of socialism. Everybody wanted to be socialist at that time. But what type of socialism? Even Nehru was not any great socialist as such, but that was the times. But he wanted an inclusive society. He thought that state should provide education, so, and the bureaucracy will honestly run the country. And these two assumptions he massively miscalculated. Bureaucrats have got their own vested interests, and also he neglected education because he did not have enough resources. People did not pay enough taxes to the governments, and governments did not have money, and they also underestimated the importance of education. So by the time they removed a lot of he was not actually against to impose any license permit Raj. It is later during the Indira Gandhi time, she actually continued the system which had where the world is changing, and she did not change according to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Most of my questions part is answered. But I would like to extend this question. Like there is a book from Angus Madison in the contours of the world economy. So in that book, he also emphasized that for the first 1,000 years, India ruled economically to whole world. So in that book, he like the AGR's work, inclusive and extractive institutions are the role have the role to decide how a country is an economic power. So what exactly in the middle, like in the under British Raj, the decline of the long-term economic growth of India, how does it imply to the modern reforms of the institutions. How we can explain those decline?
Um, Thanks, and I would like to actually break some stereotypes. There was an economist who was a former colleague of our friend Sri Mishra, Tirthankar Rai, and we never really liked his work for a very long time. But after reading, we really had to concede a lot of things from his work. That the British rule, what did British rule do to India, is actually a mixed baggage, and over period it actually kept changing also. The first 150 years, when they began trading with us in the Mughal times, we actually prospered because they had nothing to offer us. We have nothing to buy from the West. We only sold the cloth, which is very sought after, and then the spices, etc. We got the gold and silver. The gold and silver kept on coming to India for 150 years. That's what actually made Mughal Empire great. It is not Mughals who made the game, it is the artisans who made Mughal Empire great. It is the trade that made great. Okay, trade and production and trade are most important. And then after that, the industrial revolution started taking place there. That's when they made very clever moves. Then they got into opium trade, and then they made us uh, produce opium and sell it in China and get gold and silver there, and then pay us in silver, and then take it back in the form of their salaries. So they have developed very innovative accounting mechanisms through which they said that we are not plundering you, we are only buying from you, and there where they are taking has become very, because an important beneficiary of the British rule are our industrialists who became traders initially, then became industrialists. All the big trading houses, except now Ambani and Adani are different class. But before that, Tatas and Birlas and Ambanis are JK and the Singhanias, and all of them have entire Marwadis and then Tata's what they huh? Parsis. They all greatly developed from the trade and they became industrialists, like in the classic way where merchants become these things. So there are our industrial base got created only in interwar period where actually Britain could not actually supply because of the wars and this thing. So they allowed us to industrialize ourselves, gave permits to start industries. But secondary, we had to depend on their institutions to market in the world. They are called what agencies? There's some word called. They have to depend. We have to market through them. It's called. I forgot now. So, they created to after the independence. It is these group of industries who got all the licenses. So therefore, they've also benefited, and